You trusted someone completely. You showed them everything, and the moment you needed them, they vanished. Or worse, they used what you told them against you. This is what happens when you don't understand the first rule of power. If you want to hear stories like this, stories about how power really works, how the strongest people in the world think differently, how to become untouchable, subscribe to this channel right now. Because what you're about to hear will either comfort you or disturb you, but it will change how you see the world. Before we begin, I need to know, where are you right now? Are you driving? At work? Alone? Comment below. Let me know where this message found you. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Goodness is not a strategy. It's a liability dressed as virtue. Most people fail in life not because they lack intelligence or talent. They fail because they broadcast everything. They show their hand completely. And in a world where information is the most valuable currency, transparency isn't honesty. It's suicide. Think about this for a moment. You've met people who seem to glide through life effortlessly. They get opportunities. They have influence. People listen when they speak. They're respected without asking for respect. And then there are people like you, perhaps harder working, more honest, more genuine, yet constantly overlooked, passed over, taken advantage of. The question isn't why they succeed. The question is, what do they know that you don't? There's an ancient principle that was written down over 500 years ago by a man named Niccolo Machiavelli. He wasn't a philosopher in the traditional sense. He was an observer. He watched power move. He watched empires rise and fall. He studied why certain people dominated and why others were dominated. And he discovered something that makes most people deeply uncomfortable. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Almost no one knows what you actually are. And therein lies the most dangerous and most powerful weapon in the game. Let me show you what this means in real life. Imagine two people in the same company, same department, same salary. One of them, let's call him Marco, is genuinely talented. He can think strategically. He can solve problems others can't touch. And he makes one critical mistake. He shows it all immediately. In his first week, he volunteers for everything. He demonstrates his full capability. He's eager, honest, transparent. He wants to prove himself. The other person, let's call him Alessandro, is equally competent, maybe even less talented initially, but he does something different. He arrives quietly. He watches more than he speaks. When he does speak, he says only what's necessary. He completes his tasks. He doesn't announce his accomplishments. He lets others discover what he can do slowly over time. 6 months pass. Marco is being asked to do more work, more projects, more responsibility, the same amount of pay. He's become indispensable in the wrong way. He's become a tool. Because his boss knows exactly what Marco can do, so the boss keeps loading him with tasks. Marco's competence has become his prison. Alessandro, meanwhile, has been invited to meetings about strategy. His opinion is sought after. He's being considered for a promotion. The boss doesn't fully know what he's capable of. That mystery, that restraint, that careful reveal of ability, it creates respect instead of exploitation. Same company, same world, different outcomes. The first principle of untouchable power is this: never show your full strength immediately. Let them discover it slowly. Let them wonder. Let them come to you with assumptions rather than certainty. Because the moment people know exactly what you can do, they also know exactly how to use you. This isn't about dishonesty. It's about strategy. It's about understanding that the world doesn't reward the person who shows all their cards. It rewards the person who knows which cards to show and when. Most people make their biggest mistakes early. They talk too much at job interviews. They reveal too much on first dates. They show their full potential and then spend years being exploited for exactly that potential. They wonder why they're exhausted while others seem to float effortlessly through the same circumstances. The answer is simple. The people floating understand that discretion is a form of power. Mystery commands respect. The unknown is feared and respected in equal measure. But the fully known is merely a resource to be used. This is the first truth we must face. And it's a hard one. Because everything we've been taught tells us the opposite. We're told to be authentic, to be yourself completely, to wear your heart on your sleeve. And yes, authenticity has value. But strategic authenticity, knowing what part of yourself to reveal and when, that's what separates the untouchable from the exploited. So here's your first question to sit with. Where in your life have you shown too much too soon? Who benefited from your transparency? What would change if you learned to reveal yourself with intention instead of impulse? The next part gets darker, because once you understand this first principle, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In your relationships, in your career, in how power actually moves in this world. Stay close. There's a lie that's been sold to you your entire life, and it's probably cost you more than you realize. The lie is this: if you're kind to people, they'll be kind to you. If you're good to others, goodness will return. If you love people, they'll love you back. If you're generous, generosity will find its way back to you. It's called karma. It's called what goes around comes around. It's called the universe balancing itself out. It's also called bullshit. The uncomfortable reality, the one that separates the untouchable from the broken, is this: kindness without power is just invitation. Generosity without boundaries is just resource exploitation. And love without respect is just dependency. Let me be specific about what I mean. You know someone, maybe it's you, who has bent over backwards for people, who has sacrificed, who has been the reliable one, the available one, the one people call when they need something. And what happened? At the critical moment when that person needed help, nobody was there. The people they sacrificed for? Gone. The friends they were always available for? Suddenly busy. The partner they gave everything to? Found someone else. This isn't coincidence. This isn't bad luck. This is how power dynamics actually work. Here's the truth that the world doesn't want you to know. People respect what they fear, not what they love, not what they appreciate, not what they're grateful for. What they fear. Think about your own life for a second. The people you're most careful around, the ones whose opinion matters most, the ones you wouldn't dare betray or disrespect, are they the ones who loved you most? Or are they the ones who had the power to hurt you? A parent doesn't command respect because they love their child. They command respect because the child knows there are consequences for disrespect. A boss doesn't get obedience from kindness. They get obedience from the knowledge that your paycheck depends on their approval. A leader doesn't hold power through benevolence. They hold it through the implicit understanding that crossing them has a cost. This is what Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago when he said something that haunts people to this day. It is better to be feared than to be loved if you cannot be both. And the reason is simple. Love is conditional. Love changes. Love is fragile. Love requires constant maintenance. One mistake, one disappointment, one unmet expectation, and love evaporates. People who love you can turn on you in an instant. They've done it before. You've probably done it yourself. You loved someone, and then they hurt you, and now you don't. But fear? Fear is reliable. Fear is consistent. Fear creates boundaries that don't shift based on emotion. When someone fears you, not in a brutal sense, but in the sense that they respect your power and know there are consequences, they think twice before crossing you. They don't need to love you for this to work. They just need to know that you're not someone to be trifled with. Here's the practical application, and this is where most people get uncomfortable. There's a woman at work. Let's call her Sophia. Sophia is incredibly kind. She helps everyone. She listens to people's problems. She covers for colleagues when they're struggling. She's the person everyone goes to. And then one day Sophia's department gets cut. Sophia's job is eliminated. And every single person she helped, every person she covered for, every person she listened to, they don't fight for her. They don't advocate for her. They don't even mention her name. Why? Because there were no consequences for ignoring her. Sophia was available without boundaries. She was helpful without leverage. Her kindness created no obligation because nobody feared losing her favor. She was nice, so they took advantage. It's not malicious. It's just how human beings work. Now contrast this with Marco. Marco is respected at the same company. He's not the nicest person. He doesn't go out of his way to help everyone. But when Marco says something, people listen. When Marco says he'll do something, it gets done. People don't cross Marco because they've watched what happens to people who cross him. Not physically, but professionally, politically, strategically. Marco makes life difficult for people who betray him. So when Marco's position is threatened, people advocate for him, not because they love him, because they fear what his absence would mean. They fear losing his favor. They fear becoming targets. This is the second truth of untouchable power. You must establish that there's a cost to disrespecting you. And here's what most people get wrong about this. They think it means being cruel, being aggressive, being someone people actively dislike. That's the opposite. The most effective fear isn't built through violence or verbal abuse. It's built through competence and consequences. When people know you're intelligent, capable, and willing to defend your boundaries, they respect you. When they know that crossing you has a price, whether that price is professional damage, loss of opportunity, or simply the withdrawal of your support, they think before they act. A king doesn't need to yell to be obeyed. His presence alone is enough. A general doesn't need to be cruel to command troops. They need to be decisive. They need to be someone who doesn't back down. They need to be someone whose judgment is trusted and whose limits are clear. This is the energy you need to develop. Not aggressive, not cruel, but firm, uncompromising, clear about what you will and will not tolerate. Because here's what happens when people believe they can disrespect you without consequences. They will. They'll steal your ideas. They'll betray your trust. They'll use your vulnerabilities against you. They'll take advantage of your availability. And they won't feel guilty about it because in their minds, you set the precedent. You showed that there were no real consequences. But when people know you're someone who maintains your boundaries, someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect, someone who has leverage and isn't afraid to use it, they suddenly treat you very differently. Not out of love, out of respect. And respect is the only currency that actually holds value. Think about the people in your life who have the most power. Are they the ones who love everyone? Or are they the ones who make it clear they don't need everyone? The ones who can walk away? The ones who aren't desperate for approval? The untouchable person isn't someone people are desperate to please because they're so kind. They're someone people are careful around because they know where the lines are. And they know that crossing those lines has weight. This is what needs to change in how you move through the world. Not to become cold. Not to become cruel. But to become someone people respect enough not to betray. Someone with boundaries so clear that violation is obviously a bad decision. Someone who understands that compassion without power is just weakness with good intentions. The question you need to sit with is this. Who in your life has been taking advantage of your kindness? And what will change when you finally establish that there's a cost to crossing you? Because this second principle is where most people fail. They understand they shouldn't show all their cards, but they still believe that being good is enough protection. It's not. Being good and being bounded, that's protection. Being good and being exploitable, that's just a different kind of trap. In the next part, we go deeper. Because once you understand that fear must be part of your equation, the next question becomes, how do you build that fear without becoming someone you hate? Listen close. The answer might surprise you. You felt it. That moment when someone insulted you and your face flushed. When someone betrayed you and rage exploded inside your chest. When you received criticism and shame wrapped around your throat. That feeling, that overwhelming, consuming feeling, that's when you lost the game. Because in that moment you became predictable, and predictable people are controlled. The third principle of untouchable power is the most difficult to master. It's not about strategy or perception. It's about something far more fundamental. The discipline to control your own nervous system, to feel everything and show nothing, to be moved internally while remaining unmoved externally. Emotions are information. They're valuable data about what matters to you, what threatens you, what you desire. A wise person reads that information, but an untouchable person reads it without becoming enslaved by it. Here's the brutal truth. Every emotion you display is a lever someone else can pull. Think about this carefully. If people know what makes you angry, they know exactly how to manipulate you. If they know what makes you afraid, they know how to control you. If they know what makes you ashamed, they know how to break you. And most people? They wear their emotions like billboards. They advertise their triggers to anyone paying attention. Imagine a negotiation. On one side is someone who's visibly nervous, who speaks too quickly, whose voice trembles slightly when discussing certain topics. On the other side is someone who's completely calm, whose breathing never changes, whose face remains neutral, who speaks with the same measured tone whether discussing a small detail or a major point. Who has the advantage? The answer is obvious. The calm person has already won before the negotiation even begins, because the nervous person has revealed all their pressure points. The nervous person has shown which issues matter most to them, which ones make them uncomfortable, which ones they're willing to compromise on. The calm person gives away nothing, and this asymmetry of information is absolute power. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. He knew that a leader who could be provoked into anger was a leader who could be controlled. That a ruler who responded to insults with visible rage was a ruler whose enemies had found a weapon. That a strategist whose decisions were guided by emotion instead of reason was a strategist who would eventually fail. But here's where most people misunderstand this principle. They think it means becoming emotionless, becoming cold and distant, becoming someone who doesn't feel anything. That's not it at all. That's actually the opposite of what we're talking about. You feel everything. You feel the sting of rejection. You feel the heat of anger. You feel the tremor of fear. You feel the weight of disappointment. All of it moves through you. But, and this is critical, it doesn't move your face. It doesn't change your voice. It doesn't affect your decisions in the moment. This is the difference between emotional mastery and emotional suppression. Suppression is unhealthy. It poisons you from the inside. Mastery is different. Mastery is feeling it all while choosing your response with precision. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. There's a man named Dante. He's in a meeting with his boss, who's criticizing his work in front of the entire team. The criticism is unfair. Dante feels the heat rise in his chest. He feels shame and anger mixing together. His first instinct is to defend himself, to explain, to prove the boss wrong, maybe even to lash out. Every cell in his body wants to react emotionally. But Dante has learned something. He takes a breath, small enough that nobody notices. He feels the emotion fully. And then he does something crucial. He doesn't act on it. His face remains calm. His voice stays level. He nods slightly, as if considering what was said. He says, "I appreciate the feedback, I'll look into that." And he moves on. Nothing in his demeanor suggests he was affected. The boss wanted a reaction, wanted to see Dante flustered, wanted to establish dominance through emotional provocation, but Dante gave him nothing. And in that moment, something shifted. The boss realized he couldn't control Dante through embarrassment. And that realization? It's the beginning of respect. This is the power of emotional steel. It's not cruelty, it's not indifference, it's discipline. Because here's what most people don't understand. The person who can control their emotions controls the entire dynamic. When everyone else is reactive, the person who is proactive has all the power. When everyone else is fighting from a place of emotion, the person who is thinking from a place of strategy is playing chess, while everyone else is playing checkers. This doesn't mean you never show emotion. That would be suspicious and ultimately counterproductive. It means you show emotion strategically. You show just enough to seem human, but never so much that it becomes a vulnerability. You smile when appropriate. You show disappointment when strategic. You display confidence. But you never display desperation. You never display panic. You never display the raw, unfiltered emotional reactions that make you exploitable. Think about the most powerful people you know. Politicians, CEOs, high-level strategists. What do they have in common? They can be in a crisis, absolute chaos around them, and their face remains unmoved. Their voice remains steady. This isn't because they don't care. It's because they understand something fundamental. Emotion in a crisis spreads like fire, but calm in a crisis spreads like an anchor. People rally around the person who remains steady. This is also why you must never make important decisions in a state of high emotion. Not when you're angry, not when you're hurt, not when you're desperate. Because emotional decisions are predictable decisions. They're decisions your enemies can anticipate. But decisions made from a place of cold analysis, those decisions are strategic. They're unpredictable. They're dangerous. There's a reason that surgeons are trained to be emotionless during surgery. There's a reason pilots are trained to stay calm during emergencies. There's a reason military commanders maintain stoic faces during chaos. Because the person who can think clearly while everything is falling apart is the person who survives. The person who can feel deeply while acting precisely is the person who wins. This is the third principle. Become cold as steel. Feel everything internally. Display almost nothing externally. Let your emotions inform your thinking, but never let them control your actions. The question you need to sit with is this: where have your emotions been used against you? When was the last time you reacted instead of responded? And what would change if you learned to feel everything while showing almost nothing? Because the moment you understand this, the moment you truly grasp that emotional control is the foundation of all real power, everything shifts. Your relationships become clearer. Your work becomes more effective. Your life becomes more strategic. The next part gets even more specific. Because once you understand emotional mastery, the question becomes, who should you be allied with? And more importantly, who should you never depend on? Stay with me. Everyone you've ever truly needed has eventually let you down. Not because they're bad people, but because relying on someone is like handing them a dagger and trusting they'll never use it. This is the fourth principle, and it separates those who build empires from those who collapse the moment their support system crumbles. You need people. That's not weakness. That's reality. No one achieves anything alone. You need allies. You need connections. You need people who believe in you, who support you, who have your back. But, and this is the part that determines whether you rise or fall, you must never depend on any single person for your survival. Here's why this matters so much. Think about history. Think about the leaders who fell the hardest. Were they the ones without allies? No. They were the ones who became completely dependent on their allies. The kings who trusted one advisor too much and lost their kingdom when that advisor turned. The emperors who leaned too heavily on one general and watched everything collapse when that general decided to rebel. The CEOs who built their companies on the strength of one relationship and found themselves obsolete the moment that relationship ended. Dependency is invisible slavery. It looks like partnership, but it's actually a cage. Let me show you how this works in the modern world. There's a man named Giovanni. He's talented, he has skills, but he makes a critical mistake. He attaches himself completely to one person, his boss, his mentor, his champion. This person advocates for him, gets him opportunities, helps him climb, and Giovanni feels grateful, loyal. He starts to believe that his success depends entirely on this relationship. Then one day, something shifts. The mentor gets fired. The boss leaves the company. The champion moves to another organization. And suddenly, Giovanni is invisible. All the opportunities dry up. All the advancement stops. He realizes that he was never actually successful. He was just successful in the shadow of someone else's success. Here's the brutal part. He's now trapped. He has no independent reputation, no track record of his own, no network that exists outside this one relationship. He's become what Machiavelli warned about centuries ago, a man lifted up by others, dependent on their continued support, disposable the moment they no longer serve his purpose. Now contrast this with someone else. Let's call her Lucia. Lucia also has mentors. She also has allies, people who advocate for her and support her. But she does something different. She builds multiple relationships. She doesn't put all her eggs in one basket. She develops her own skills independently. She creates her own reputation. She doesn't wait for her mentor to open doors. She learns how to break them down herself. When her primary ally moves on, she's fine. More than fine. She has other relationships to draw on. More importantly, She has a foundation that exists independent of any single person. Years later, when companies collapse or markets shift or powerful people fall from grace, Lucia remains standing. Not because she's lucky, but because she was never dependent. She was never trapped. This is the fourth principle of untouchable power. Have allies, but structure your life so that you could survive and thrive without any single one of them. And here's what this actually means in practice. First, cultivate multiple relationships across different domains. If all your allies are in your industry, you're vulnerable when your industry contracts. If all your allies are in your company, you're vulnerable when your company fails. If all your allies are of the same social class or background, you're limited in your perspective and your options. The untouchable person has relationships everywhere, in their industry and outside it, above them and below them, in different countries, different fields, different worlds. This isn't about collecting people like business cards. It's about building genuine relationships with people who offer different advantages and perspectives. Second, always be developing yourself independently. Your value should not be tied to any single relationship. You should be someone worth knowing on your own merits. Your skills, your knowledge, your reputation, your track record. These should belong to you, not to anyone who helped you develop them. This is crucial, because the moment you become too valuable to lose, people treat you differently. They become more careful. They respect your autonomy. They negotiate with you as an equal, rather than trying to control you. Third, be willing to cut ties when necessary. This is the hard part, because we're taught to be loyal, to stick with people who helped us, to never abandon those who believed in us. And there's value in loyalty, but not at the cost of your own development or freedom. Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp. Sometimes the person who elevated you is no longer useful. Sometimes they're actually holding you back. Sometimes they need you more than you need them, and that's when the dynamic becomes dangerous. That's when your ally becomes your anchor. The untouchable person can make this calculation without guilt. They can look at an old relationship and ask, does this serve me anymore? Am I growing here or stagnating? Is this person pushing me forward or holding me back? And if the answer is that the relationship has become a burden, they have the strength to walk away. Here's a specific example. A young man builds a relationship with an older, more established entrepreneur. The older man becomes his mentor, invites him to opportunities, introduces him to people, and for a time this is incredibly valuable. The young man learns exponentially. But then something happens. The young man's skills surpass his mentor's. His network becomes larger. His opportunities become bigger. But the mentor still treats him like an apprentice, still wants deference, still wants to maintain control over the relationship. And now, staying in this relationship is actually limiting the young man's growth. The untouchable person recognizes this. He's grateful for what was given to him. But he's also honest about where he stands now. He restructures the relationship or ends it. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. He understands that his continued growth depends on not being held back by loyalty to a relationship that no longer serves him. This is uncomfortable. This is the part that challenges every value system that teaches us to be grateful and loyal above all else. But it's also the difference between becoming truly powerful and remaining trapped in someone else's shadow. The question you need to sit with is this: who are you depending on too much? What would happen to your life if that person disappeared tomorrow? And where are you failing to develop independence because you're too comfortable in a dependent position? Because here's the truth that the untouchable understand. Independence is attractive. The person who clearly doesn't need anyone becomes the most valuable ally. The person who could walk away at any moment becomes the person everyone wants to keep. The person who builds power from within rather than borrowing it becomes unstoppable. Your allies should amplify your power, not replace it. Support your strategy, not create it. Open doors that you help design. If your allies are doing anything less, you're not in an alliance. You're in a cage. In the next part, we move into something equally important. Because once you understand independence, you have to understand how to project the image of power itself. Because perception, it turns out, is more valuable than reality. Hold on. You could be the most intelligent person in a room. You could have solved the problem everyone else missed. You could have the answer that changes everything, and nobody would ever know. Because if you don't look the part, if you don't sound the part, if you don't carry yourself like someone who knows what they're talking about, then in the minds of everyone watching, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the fifth principle, and it's perhaps the most liberating and the most unsettling at the same time. Perception is not a reflection of reality. Perception is reality. In human interaction, in power dynamics, in how the world actually works, what people believe about you is infinitely more important than what is actually true about you. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few ever feel what you actually are. And this isn't a flaw in human nature. It's the foundation of human nature. We are visual creatures. We make decisions in seconds based on signals. And those signals, your posture, your voice, your presence, your energy, these matter far more than the truth of who you are. Think about this. Two people apply for the same job. Person A is genuinely more qualified. They have more experience. They have better skills. But they walk into the interview room slouched. They speak quietly. They apologize for their answers. They seem uncertain. They don't maintain eye contact. Person B is less qualified on paper. But they walk into that room with presence. They sit up straight. They speak clearly and deliberately. They answer with confidence. They maintain eye contact. They seem to know exactly who they are and what they're worth. Who gets hired? Not the qualified person. The person who appears qualified. This is what most people never understand about power. Power isn't about what you actually possess. Power is about what others believe you possess. And what others believe is determined almost entirely by the image you project. Here's a specific example from the real world. There's a woman named Elena. She's in a meeting with executives. She's the only woman at the table. She's also the youngest. She has good ideas. But she hesitates before speaking. She phrases her ideas as questions. Would it maybe be possible if we, perhaps considered? Her tone goes up at the end of her sentences, making statements sound like questions. She touches her hair nervously. She apologizes before offering opinions. The executives nod politely, but they don't take her seriously. Why? Because her body language is screaming insecurity. Her voice is screaming uncertainty. And even though her ideas are solid, nobody believes in them because she doesn't seem to believe in them. Then there's another woman. Let's call her Francesca. She has fewer years of experience. But when she speaks with certainty. She makes statements, not questions. Her voice is steady. Her posture is upright. She looks people in the eye. When she has an idea, she presents it as a fact, not a possibility. She seems completely comfortable taking up space in that room. The executives lean forward. They listen more carefully. They build on her ideas. They respect her. Why? Because she's projecting competence. She's projecting authority. And perception becomes belief, becomes reality. The difference? It's not qualification. It's presentation. It's understanding that the image you project is the image that people will respond to. This is crucial to understand. You're not being dishonest when you do this. You're not lying about who you are. You're simply choosing how to present what you are. The same person can present themselves as weak or strong, uncertain or confident, desperate or unaffected. These are all choices, and the untouchable person understands that they have to make these choices intentionally. Because if you don't choose how to present yourself, the world will choose for you, and it will always choose against your interests. Here's what this looks like practically. First, your posture matters. A person who stands straight, who sits up, who takes up space physically, is perceived as more powerful than someone who hunches, who curls inward, who makes themselves small. This isn't about vanity. It's about the way human beings read signals. Dominance is associated with vertical space. Submission is associated with collapsing inward. Your body is constantly communicating which one you are. Second, your voice matters. Not the pitch. You can't control that. But the pace, the volume, the certainty. A person who speaks slowly and deliberately is perceived as more thoughtful than someone who rushes through their words. A person who speaks at a consistent volume is perceived as more confident than someone whose voice gets smaller when they're nervous. A person who doesn't use filler words, like, is perceived as more intelligent than someone who does. Try this experiment. Listen to two people tell the same story. One person says, so I was, at this place and it was kind of crazy. The other says, I was at this place. It was intense. Same event. Same information. But one person sounds intelligent and composed. The other sounds confused and uncertain. Third, your energy matters. There's something called presence. It's not something you're born with, it's something you cultivate. It's the quality of being completely present, completely aware, completely in control of yourself in any given moment. A person with presence commands attention. People feel it. Not consciously, but they feel it. How do you develop presence? By being genuinely aware of your surroundings. By listening more than you speak. By moving with intention rather than fidgeting. By maintaining eye contact. By breathing deeply. By being mentally present instead of distracted or anxious. Fourth, your consistency matters. The person who shows up every day with the same energy, the same demeanor, the same level of competence, is perceived as stable and reliable. The person whose energy fluctuates wildly, whose confidence depends on circumstances, whose presence changes based on who's in the room, that person is perceived as unstable. This doesn't mean being robotic or inhuman. It means having a core presentation that remains consistent. You can be warm and closed off, energetic and calm, approachable and distant, but whatever you choose should remain consistent. Because consistency builds reputation. Inconsistency creates doubt. Here's the deeper part of this principle. The image you project actually reshapes who you become. This is psychological truth. If you carry yourself like someone competent long enough, you actually become more competent. Because competence attracts opportunities. Opportunities teach you things. Things make you genuinely capable. The reverse is also true. If you project insecurity long enough, you become more insecure. Because insecurity repels opportunities. Without opportunities, you don't develop skills. Without skills, you remain insecure. So when we talk about cultivating an image of power, we're not talking about deception. We're talking about choosing who you want to become, and then projecting that version of yourself consistently until it becomes real. The question you need to sit with is this. What image are you currently projecting? Is it intentional? Or is it accidental? And what image would you need to project to open the doors that are currently closed to you? Because here's the truth. The world doesn't give respect to the deserving. It gives respect to those who demand it through their presence. The world doesn't recognize competence that hides in the shadows. It recognizes competence that stands in the light. In the next part, we explore something equally powerful. How to use the chaos and randomness of life itself as a weapon in your favor. Stay aware. You've watched it happen. Someone gets a lucky break. They're in the right place at the right time. And suddenly their life changes. You tell yourself it was luck, destiny, timing, as if the universe chose them for some reason. But here's what you didn't see. That person wasn't lucky. They were prepared. And when opportunity finally arrived, and it arrives for everyone at some point, they were ready to seize it while everyone else was sleeping. This is the sixth principle, and it separates those who drift through life from those who actually control their trajectory. Machiavelli called it fortuna, the forces you cannot control, the randomness, the inesperado, the tides of circumstance that rise and fall according to patterns no individual can fully predict. Plague, war, economic collapse, market boom, a chance meeting that changes everything. A door that suddenly opens, a door that suddenly closes. Most people see fortuna as something that happens to them, something they're either blessed with or cursed with. But Machiavelli understood something crucial. Fortuna isn't the determining factor. Your relationship to fortuna is the determining factor. Think of fortuna as a river. In times of peace, in times of stability, the river flows slowly and predictably. You can see the bottom. You know where the current is. But when the rains come, when crisis hits, when the world shifts, when everything becomes unstable, the river floods. It rises. It becomes violent and destructive. The unprepared person drowns. They're swept away. They're destroyed by forces they never saw coming. But the person who built dikes before the flood, the person who elevated their house before the water rose, the person who learned to swim before the deluge arrived, that person survives. That person actually rises on the same water that drowns everyone else. This is the fundamental truth of Fortuna. It isn't good or bad in itself. It's an amplifier. It amplifies what already exists. For the prepared, opportunity is a wave that carries them forward. For the unprepared, it's a wave that buries them. Let me show you how this works in modern life. There are two entrepreneurs. Both work in technology, same market, same industry, same economic conditions. Then the market shifts. A new opportunity emerges, new demand, new possibilities. The market floods with opportunity. The first entrepreneur was unprepared. He was comfortable. He had a decent income from his current business. He wasn't studying market trends. He wasn't learning new skills. He wasn't building relationships in adjacent fields. When the opportunity arrived, he didn't see it. Or worse, he saw it, but didn't have the skills or the network to seize it. The wave passed him by. The second entrepreneur was in a constant state of readiness. He was studying, learning, building relationships, expanding his understanding of adjacent markets. He had developed multiple skills. He had built a diverse network. When the opportunity arrived, the exact same wave that passed the first entrepreneur, he was positioned to ride it. He saw it first because he was paying attention. He had the skills to execute because he had been preparing. He had the network to move quickly because he had been building it. Same opportunity, same moment, different outcomes, not because of luck, because of preparation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Luck is largely a myth. What we call luck is actually preparation meeting opportunity. An opportunity comes to everyone. It's constantly arriving. It's in the market shifts. It's in the people you meet. It's in the problems that need solving. It's everywhere. But most people miss it because they're not prepared to see it. This is what the untouchable person understands. You cannot control when opportunity arrives, but you can absolutely control whether you're ready when it does. Here's what this actually means in practice. First, you must develop skills constantly, not in your comfort zone, but in new areas. The person who only knows one thing is trapped by that one thing. When that field contracts, they're destroyed. But the person who has studied multiple domains, who has learned complementary skills, who can move fluidly between different areas of knowledge, that person has options. That person can see and exploit opportunities that specialists miss. This doesn't mean being generically competent at everything. It means being deeply competent in your primary domain while developing strategic competency in adjacent areas. It means reading widely, learning constantly, expanding your perspective. Because the opportunities that compound, the ones that change everything, rarely come from doing more of what you already do. They come from seeing connections nobody else sees. Second, you must stay aware of what's happening in the world. Not to become paranoid or anxious, but to stay positioned. The person who knows what's coming can prepare. The person who's surprised by change is the person who gets buried by it. Read, listen, pay attention to trends. Understand what's shifting in your market, your industry, your field, the world, not out of fear, but out of strategic awareness. Third, you must build your network intentionally, but not in the way most people think about networking, not collecting business cards, not showing up at events to promote yourself, but actually building genuine relationships with people in different fields, different levels, different worlds. Because opportunity often comes through unexpected channels. The job that changes your life might come from someone you met years ago in a completely different context. The insight that compounds your business might come from a friend in a totally unrelated field. Fourth, and this is crucial, you must maintain your readiness even during good times. This is where most people fail. When things are going well, when you're comfortable, when there's no crisis, people become complacent. They stop learning. They stop preparing. They think the good times will continue forever. And then the market shifts. Then the wave comes. And they're completely unprepared. The untouchable person does the opposite. When things are good, they prepare harder. They know that good times create complacency. And complacency is how you get destroyed when things shift. They use the stability to build skills, to expand their network, to deepen their understanding. Here's a specific principle. Never wait for crisis to prepare. By then it's too late. Prepare during abundance. The time to learn to swim is when the water is calm, not when the flood is coming. Fifth, you must be willing to move quickly when opportunity arrives. And this requires that you've already made certain decisions. You know what you want. You know what you're willing to sacrifice for it. You know what your limits are. So when opportunity arrives, you don't have to think. You can act. You can move while others are still deliberating. The person who says, "Let me think about it," misses the wave. The person who's already thought about it and says, "Yes, I'm in," catches it. This is why the preparation matters so much. It's not just about having skills. It's about having the mental and strategic clarity to act instantly when the moment arrives. It's about knowing yourself well enough that when opportunity presents itself, you don't have to ask permission from yourself. You can move. Here's the dark part of this principle. Some people will never get their wave. Not because they're undeserving, but because they refuse to prepare when the times were good. They refuse to develop skills. They refuse to expand their network. They refuse to stay aware. And when their moment arrived, and it did arrive even if they didn't recognize it, they weren't ready. So they watched it pass. The question you need to sit with is this. What wave is currently passing by you that you're too unprepared to catch? And what will you need to learn, develop, and build in order to catch the next one? Because here's the ultimate truth. You cannot control fortuna, but you can control your preparation for it. And the person who is prepared doesn't need luck. They just need the wave to come, and it always does. In the next part, we explore something equally important. How the mistakes of others become the roadmap for your success. Pay attention. You're living in a different world than Machiavelli. The stage has changed. The weapons are different. But the principles remain exactly the same, because human nature hasn't evolved. It's just found new platforms. The untouchable person doesn't exist only in boardrooms and palaces anymore. They exist in every arena where power is contested. In money, in relationships, in status, in the social media landscape that has become the modern battleground for influence and respect. Let me show you how the principles we've discussed translate directly into your modern life. Start with money, because money is the most honest measure of power in the modern world. It's not about being rich. It's about understanding money as a form of strategic leverage. Most people approach money reactively. They earn it. They spend it. They worry about not having enough. They measure their worth by their bank account. But the untouchable person approaches money strategically. They understand something crucial. Money is a tool for freedom, not a measure of success. This changes everything. Because when you see money as freedom rather than status, you make different decisions. You don't spend on things that impress people. You spend on things that expand your options. You don't pursue money for the sake of having it. You pursue it for the leverage it creates. Here's how this plays out. Two people make the same salary. Person A saves nothing. Spends everything on image, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, status symbols. Person A is trapped. If they lose their job, they're in crisis. If they want to leave a bad situation, they can't because they need the income. They're dependent on employment. They're not free. Person B saves aggressively, lives below their means, builds what's called financial runway. After a few years, Person B has enough money to survive for months without income. Suddenly, Person B has leverage. If they're treated poorly at work, they can leave. If they see a better opportunity, they can take it. If they want to invest in something, they have capital. Person B has freedom, and freedom is power. The untouchable person builds financial runway first, then everything else becomes possible. They're not playing for status, they're playing for leverage. Now move to relationships. Because the same principles apply, and this is where people struggle most. Most people approach relationships from a place of need. They need to be loved. They need validation. They need someone to complete them. And from that place of need, they give away all their power. They become compromising. They become available. They become controllable. They accept disrespect because they're afraid of losing the relationship. The untouchable person does something different. They approach relationships from a place of abundance. They are complete within themselves. A relationship is an addition to their life, not the foundation of it. This changes the dynamic completely, because now they're not desperate. They're not willing to accept anything. They have standards. They're willing to walk away. Here's what most people don't understand. The person who is willing to walk away is the person who never has to. Because people respect unwillingness to compromise on self-respect. They value relationships with people who value themselves. So the application in relationships is this. Develop yourself first. Build your own life. Become someone worth being with. Then invite people into that life rather than trying to build a life around people. The difference is subtle but profound. One gives you power. The other takes it away. Now to status. This is where the modern world gets tricky. Because status is more visible than ever. Social media has made status into a visible metric. Followers, likes, comments, verification. Everyone can see who has status and who doesn't. And most people are obsessed with it. They post constantly. They perform their lives. They chase validation through likes and comments. And in doing this, they become enslaved to the algorithm. They become dependent on the opinions of strangers. They've given away their power to a system that doesn't care about them. The untouchable person understands that real status isn't visible online. Real status is offline. It's the person who doesn't need to perform because they're secure in who they are. It's the person who uses social media strategically, not emotionally. It's the person who could disappear from every platform tomorrow and their actual power wouldn't diminish. Here's the application. If you're obsessed with your online status, you've already lost power. The moment your self-worth is tied to your metrics, you're dependent on those metrics. You're owned by the platform. But if you can use social media strategically while remaining completely unconcerned with your metrics, then you have leverage. You can build audience without needing audience validation. That's power. Now to burnout. This is crucial because burnout is how you lose everything. Burnout happens when you invest all your energy into something external that doesn't belong to you. Your job, your relationship, someone else's vision. And when burnout hits, and it always does, you collapse. You have nothing left. You have no energy for yourself, no reserves. You've given everything and received nothing but exhaustion. The untouchable person distributes their energy strategically. They have their primary focus. But they also maintain other areas of their life, other projects, other relationships, other sources of meaning. So if one area collapses, they don't collapse with it. They have resources. They have reserves. They have multiple reasons to get out of bed. This isn't about working less. It's about working smarter. It's about not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's about understanding that the moment you become completely dependent on one source of income, one relationship, one project, that's the moment you become vulnerable. The application is simple. Diversify your life. Build multiple streams of income if possible. Maintain multiple significant relationships. Have interests outside your primary work. Have a life that isn't dependent on any single element remaining stable. Here's the deeper principle that connects all of this. In the modern world, untouchable power is built on independence. Financial independence. Emotional independence, social independence. The person who has multiple options is the person who cannot be controlled. The person who has built a life that doesn't collapse if one element is removed is the person who actually has power. This is why the principles from 500 years ago still apply. Because what they described was human nature. And human nature doesn't change. It just finds new arenas to play in. The question you need to sit with is this. Where in your modern life have you given away your power? Where are you dependent? Where would your life collapse if one element was removed? And what will you do to build the independence that actually makes you untouchable? Because the modern world rewards the same people it has always rewarded. those who understand power, those who maintain their independence, those who see the patterns and play by them rather than against them. In the next part, we stop talking about principles and start saying the hard truths directly. Prepare yourself. Everything you've heard so far has been strategic principles, tools, ways to navigate power. But now we arrive at the part where strategy stops and reality begins. These are the truths that are so obvious, so simple, that people spend their entire lives avoiding them. Listen to them, because they will either destroy you or liberate you. There's no middle ground. Truth number 1. Goodness without power is indistinguishable from weakness. This is the statement that will make people angry. They want to believe that being good is enough, that virtue is its own reward, that the universe balances itself out. It doesn't. The world is full of good people destroyed by those with less virtue but more intelligence. Kindness without boundaries is just invitation to exploitation. Generosity without leverage is just a performance for people who will forget it the moment it's inconvenient. The untouchable person understands this. They're not cruel, but they're not naive either. They've learned that goodness must be paired with strength or it becomes a liability. The kind person who also has the power to hurt you if you betray them. That's someone people respect. The kind person who has no power to retaliate. That's someone people take advantage of. This is the bitter reality. And it's bitter because everything we're taught as children contradicts it. We're taught that being good is enough. It's not. Never has been. Never will be. Truth number 2. Most people will disappoint you the moment it's convenient for them to do so. You have people in your life, family, friends, partners, colleagues, and you believe on some level that they would sacrifice for you, that they care about you, that they would be there when you needed them. Maybe some would, but most wouldn't. Not because they're bad people, but because most people prioritize their own survival, their own comfort, their own interests above abstract loyalty to someone else. This isn't cynicism, this is observation. Watch how people behave when no one's watching. Watch what they do when it costs them something. Watch how quickly they disappear when association with you becomes inconvenient. The number of people who will actually risk something for you is smaller than you think. Probably smaller than 5. Maybe smaller than 1. This is why building your life around the assumption that people will support you is building on sand. Some will, but the ones who do, you'll know. Because they'll have already demonstrated it through actions, not words. Everyone else is just waiting for an excuse to leave. Truth number 3. Your pain is not special and the world doesn't care about it. You've suffered. You've been betrayed. You've been hurt. And you believe this suffering means something, that the universe took notice, that your pain will somehow be balanced by future rewards. It won't. The universe is indifferent. The world doesn't know you're suffering, and even if it did, it wouldn't care. This is liberating if you let it be, because if the world doesn't care about your suffering, then your suffering isn't worth your attention either. Other people's sympathy for your pain is temporary. The world's compassion for your situation is non-existent. The only response to suffering that actually matters is your own decision to do something about it. The untouchable person understands that wallowing in pain is a luxury they cannot afford. Yes, they feel it, but they don't broadcast it. They don't expect the world to validate it. They process it and move forward. Because they understand something crucial. The world respects those who handle their own problems, not those who expect others to handle problems for them. Truth number 4. Time is more cruel than any enemy you'll ever face. Every moment that passes is a moment you'll never get back. Every day you spend in the wrong job is a day you could have spent building something real. Every year you spend with the wrong person is a year stolen from your life. Every season you spend unprepared is a season you could have used to grow. And the cruelty of time is that it doesn't hurt in the moment. You don't feel it. You think you have unlimited tomorrows. You think you can start next year. You think there's always more time. And then suddenly you're 30, then 40, then 50, and you look back and realize that all the time you thought you had, it's gone, and all the things you were going to do, they're not going to happen. Not because you couldn't have done them, but because you chose to believe you had more time. The untouchable person doesn't make this mistake. They understand that time is finite. They understand that every choice is a choice to do something else. They understand that there's no dress rehearsal. This is it. And that understanding shapes everything they do. Truth number 5. Most of what you've been taught about how the world works is wrong. You were taught that if you work hard, you'll succeed. You were taught that merit rises to the top. You were taught that good people get rewarded and bad people get punished. You were taught that the system is fair if you just play by the rules. You were taught that justice exists. You were taught that honesty is always the best policy. None of this is true. Hard work matters, but effort alone doesn't determine outcome. Merit matters, but it's invisible without visibility. Good people suffer. Bad people prosper. The system is rigged in ways you don't even see. Justice is a luxury. And honesty? Honesty is a tool, not a principle. You use it when it serves you and abandon it when it doesn't. This isn't nihilism. This is realism. The moment you stop believing in the fairy tales and start seeing the world as it actually is, everything changes. Because now you can actually work with reality instead of against it. These 5 truths are uncomfortable. They contradict everything you've been taught. They contradict the comfortable narratives that let you feel good about your suffering and your failures. But they're the foundation of actual power. Because power isn't built on delusion. It's built on clarity. And clarity begins with seeing what's actually true, not what's comforting. The question you need to ask yourself is this: are you willing to see the world as it actually is? Or do you prefer the comfort of lies? Because that choice, right there, that's the choice that determines whether you become untouchable or remain trapped. The next part is where we show you how to actually apply this. How to live with this knowledge without becoming bitter. How to use these truths as power rather than as poison. But you have to be ready. You're in a meeting. Someone criticizes you, publicly, in front of people whose respect you need, and in that moment something fires in your chest. Heat rises to your face, your hands want to shake, your voice wants to crack. Everything in you wants to defend yourself, to explain, to prove them wrong, to make them understand. This is the moment that defines you, and almost everyone fails it. Because maintaining emotional control isn't something you do once and master. It's a discipline you practice every single day, in small moments, in unobserved moments, building the capacity so that when the real test comes, you're ready. This is the 9th truth. The untouchable person has trained themselves in the art of controlled response. Let me show you what this looks like because it's the difference between theory and actual practice. First, understand what's happening in your body when you feel strong emotion. Your nervous system is activating. Adrenaline is flooding. Your fight or flight response is kicking in. This is physiology. This is real. You're not weak for feeling it, but you are weak if you're controlled by it. The practice begins with something simple. Breathing. Not casual breathing. Conscious breathing. When you feel the heat rising, when you feel the emotion coming, you pause, and you breathe deliberately, slowly, completely filling your lungs, holding for a moment, then exhaling completely. This simple act does something crucial. It gives your nervous system a signal that you're safe. It allows you to think. It prevents the automatic reaction. This is why soldiers are trained to breathe, why pilots practice breathing, why anyone in a high-stakes situation needs to understand breathing. Because a breath is the difference between acting and reacting, between strategy and impulse. But breathing is just the foundation. The real discipline goes deeper. The next level is what we might call emotional separation. This is the capacity to observe your emotions without being consumed by them. You feel the anger. You notice it. You name it internally. I'm feeling angry. But you don't act from it. You don't speak from it. You don't let it determine your response. You simply acknowledge it and move forward anyway. This is harder than it sounds. Because emotions want expression. They want to be felt externally. They want to be heard. And the untouchable person says, no, I feel you, but you don't get to control me. Here's a practical example of what this looks like in real life. There's a man named Marco. He's in a negotiation. The person across from him makes an offer that's insulting. It's low. It's disrespectful. And Marco feels the anger immediately. His face flushes slightly. His jaw tightens. Everything in him wants to say, "Are you serious? This is insulting. We're done here." But Marco has trained himself. He takes a breath. He separates from the emotion. He recognizes, "I'm angry because this offer is disrespectful. That's accurate information. My anger is telling me something true. But my anger doesn't get to make this decision." Instead, Marco does something different. He pauses. He looks at the person, and he says calmly, "That offer doesn't work for me. What else can you offer?" His voice is neutral. His face is neutral. His energy hasn't changed. But internally, he's used that anger as information. That anger told him the offer was bad. And now he's acting on that information without being controlled by the emotion. The person across the table feels the difference. They feel that Marco isn't upset, isn't desperate, isn't trying to prove something. Marco is simply stating a fact. And that emotional discipline, that refusal to show the anger even though it's present, gives Marco all the leverage. This is the real application. It's not about not feeling. It's about feeling and choosing not to react. Here's another layer. Understanding what triggers you emotionally, and then choosing not to give people access to those triggers. Most people broadcast their triggers constantly. Someone says something that attacks their intelligence, and they get defensive. Someone criticizes their appearance, and they get angry. Someone questions their loyalty, and they get hurt. All of this signals their vulnerabilities. And once people know your vulnerabilities, they own you. The untouchable person does something different. They know their own triggers, but they also know that showing them is a mistake. So they control what they reveal. They don't get defensive when their intelligence is questioned. They simply move on. They don't get emotional when criticized. They consider if it's useful feedback. They don't react when their loyalty is questioned. They simply act in accordance with their values. Why? Because consistency is more powerful than emotion. When people can't trigger you, they lose their leverage. And when they lose their leverage, they stop trying. Here's the deep practice. Daily emotional discipline in small moments. This is where the real work happens. Not in the big moments. In the small moments. When someone cuts you off in traffic and you want to rage. When you make a mistake and you want to self-flagellate. When someone doesn't respond to a message and you want to panic. When you don't get something you wanted and you want to spiral. These small moments are your training ground. Every time you feel a strong emotion and choose to respond rather than react, you're building the capacity. Every time you breathe instead of exploding, you're training yourself. Every time you pause instead of speaking immediately, you're practicing. And then when the real test comes, when someone publicly criticizes you, when you face actual betrayal, when something genuinely threatening happens, you're ready, because you've already practiced thousands of times. Most people skip this. They think emotional discipline is something you summon in the moment of crisis. It's not. It's something you build daily through small choices. It's like physical training. You don't become strong by lifting heavy things once. You become strong by lifting things consistently, even when the weight seems manageable. The same is true with emotional discipline. You don't become emotionally controlled by facing one huge emotional challenge. You become emotionally controlled by controlling yourself in small moments every single day. Here's the practice. For the next week, notice every moment when you feel a strong emotion. Don't act on it immediately. Breathe. Separate from it. Observe it. And then respond from a place of strategy rather than impulse. Do this in small moments. In big moments. In moments that matter and moments that don't. Just practice. What you'll notice is that it gets easier. Your nervous system starts to trust that strong emotions don't require immediate action. Your mind starts to understand that you have choice. Your body starts to become calm even when provoked. This is the discipline of the untouchable. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of choice. The ability to feel everything while revealing almost nothing. The capacity to be moved internally while remaining unmoved externally. The The question you need to sit with is this: what emotion controls you most? What situation makes you reactive instead of strategic? And are you willing to practice emotional discipline in small moments so that when the real test comes, you're ready? Because this discipline is what separates those who are controlled by the world from those who control themselves. And controlling yourself is the first step to controlling anything else. In the next part, we move into something different. We move into how to align with the forces that matter. Prepare to shift. You've learned how to hide your strength, how to maintain your independence, how to control your emotions, how to project power, how to prepare for opportunity, how to learn from others' mistakes, how to stay flexible, how to discipline yourself. But you still can't do it alone. And that's not a weakness. That's a fact. On the chessboard of power, the person who tries to win by themselves always loses. Not because they lack capability, but because power is ultimately a game played between people. And the person who understands how to align people to their vision will always defeat the person who tries to carry everything alone. This is the 10th truth. The untouchable person builds alliances strategically. But here's where most people misunderstand this. They think building alliances means being nice to everyone, being charming, collecting friends, building a large network, making everyone like you. And that's not just wrong, it's the opposite of what actually works. Strategic alliances are different. They're not about being liked. They're about being useful to each other. They're not about collecting people. They're about choosing the right people. They're not about everyone. They're about the specific people who amplify your power and who you can genuinely help in return. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. There are two leaders in the same industry. Both are competent. Both are intelligent. But they take different approaches to alliances. The first leader tries to be friends with everyone. He goes to every networking event. He's charming. He remembers names. He makes people feel valued. He builds a huge network of hundreds of people. And then something happens. He needs help. He calls his network. And people are too busy. They're vague. They make excuses. The network was built on surface-level connection, not real mutual benefit. When it came time to actually activate that network, it didn't work. The second leader is more selective. She doesn't try to befriend everyone. Instead, she identifies the people who matter, the people who have skills she needs, the people who have influence in areas she wants to reach, the people who share a vision aligned with hers. And with those people, she builds real relationships. She helps them. She shows up for them. She creates genuine mutual benefit. When she needs help, she makes the call. And because the relationship was built on real foundation, on genuine mutual benefit, on demonstrated loyalty, on shared vision, people show up. Because they want to. Because they know she would do the same for them. Same industry. Different outcomes. Not because of the size of the network. Because of the quality of the relationships. Here's the first principle of strategic alliances. Quality over quantity. You don't need hundreds of allies. You need a few real ones. People who've already demonstrated that they're reliable. People whose values align with yours. People who you can trust because they've given you reasons to trust them through their actions, not their words. And here's the crucial part. You test before you commit. You don't share your biggest vulnerabilities with someone you just met. You don't become completely dependent on someone who hasn't proven themselves. You build trust slowly through small demonstrations. You watch how people behave when no one's watching. You see if they keep their word in small things before you trust them with big things. This is strategic. This is not paranoid. This is just intelligent relationship building. The second principle, every alliance must have clear mutual benefit. This is where people get it wrong. They think alliances are about sacrifice, about giving endlessly to someone and hoping that eventually the favor comes back. That's not an alliance. That's servitude. A real alliance has clear value flowing both directions. Yes, the values might be different. You might need their network while they need your expertise. You might provide access while they provide capital. The forms of value might not be identical. But both sides must benefit. Both sides must see the return. If you're in an alliance where you're always giving and rarely receiving, you're not in an alliance, you're in a cage. And the moment you become aware of it, you have to be willing to end it. Because continuing in a one-directional relationship is choosing to be exploited. The third principle, cultivate relationships before you need them. This is where the untouchable person separates from everyone else. Most people only reach out to their network when they need something. They disappear for months and then suddenly call asking for a favor. And people resent this, it feels transactional, it feels desperate. But the person who maintains relationships consistently, who reaches out just to check in, who helps without needing anything in return, who builds relationship as an ongoing practice, that person has leverage. When they make a call, people answer, because the relationship is already warm, because they've already demonstrated investment. Here's the practice. Identify your 5 most important potential allies, the people who matter most to your vision, and start building relationship with them now, not when you need them. Now. Reach out, offer value, show interest, build genuine connection. And when the time comes that you need them, and it will, the relationship is already there. The fourth principle, diversity in alliances. If all your allies are in your industry, you're vulnerable when your industry shifts. If all your allies are in your income bracket, you miss opportunities that come from different levels. If all your allies think like you miss insights that come from different perspectives. The untouchable person builds alliances across different domains, different industries, different socioeconomic levels, different geographies, different worldviews. This creates multiple pathways for opportunity. It provides perspective that challenges your thinking. It gives you access to worlds you don't naturally inhabit. The fifth principle, be ruthless about removing toxic relationships. This is the hard part, because we're taught to be loyal, to stick with people, to honor old relationships. But loyalty to someone who's no longer serving your growth, who's actively holding you back, who's draining your energy, that's not virtue. That's self-sabotage. The untouchable person can look at an old relationship and ask, is this still serving me? Is this person helping me become who I want to become? Or are they keeping me stuck in who I used to be? And if the answer is that the relationship is holding them back, they have the strength to walk away. This isn't about being cruel. It's about being honest. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for an old relationship is to end it. To say, we're not aligned anymore. I'm grateful for what we shared. But this relationship isn't working. And the person can go find relationships that do work. The sixth principle, never forget that alliances are ultimately self-interested. This is the truth that makes people uncomfortable, but it's important. An alliance isn't a friendship. It's not about love. It's about mutual benefit. And the moment the mutual benefit disappears, the alliance can, and should, dissolve. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you realistic. Because the moment you start making decisions out of loyalty rather than strategy, you start making bad decisions. You keep alliances that are draining you. You support people who are weighing you down. You sacrifice your own progress for someone else's comfort. The untouchable person is honest about this. With themselves and eventually with others. We're aligned. This is beneficial. We work together. If the alignment breaks, we part ways. No hard feelings. No drama. Just acknowledgement of reality. The question you need to sit with is this. Who are your real allies? The people you can actually depend on. Who is just convenient proximity? Who is actively draining you? And what would change if you started being intentional about your alliances instead of just letting them happen? Because here's the final truth about alliances. They're not the source of your power. They're an amplifier of your power. The source of your power is always yourself, your skills, your character, your strategy, your discipline. Alliances multiply that power, but they don't create it. Which means you must never need an alliance so badly that you'll accept anything. You must never be so dependent that you lose yourself in pursuit of approval from your allies. You must always maintain the capacity to stand alone. Because the person who can stand alone is the person who can form genuine alliances. The person who must have alliance? They're trapped. In the final part, We bring it all together. We show you what the untouchable person actually looks like when all of these principles are integrated. This is the moment where theory becomes reality. Stay focused. Everything we've discussed has led to this moment, not to a conclusion but to a beginning. Because understanding these principles is different from living them, and living them is what makes you untouchable. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like. The untouchable person is not what you think they are. They're not cold. They're not cruel. They're not someone who walks through life leaving destruction in their wake. They're actually the opposite. They're someone who moves through the world with such clarity, such intention, such mastery over themselves that they rarely need to be any of those things. Here's what you see when you encounter them. They speak less than everyone else in the room, but when they speak, people listen. Not because they're loud, because they're precise. They don't waste words, they don't ramble. They don't need to convince you. They simply state what's true, and their calm certainty makes you believe them. They're kind, but not in a way that makes them vulnerable. Their kindness has boundaries. They help people, but they don't sacrifice themselves in the process. They're generous with their time, but only to people who've earned it. Their generosity is a choice, not a compulsion, and that makes it valuable. They're ambitious, but not desperate. They want things, they want success, influence, impact, but they want them on their own terms. They're not chasing approval. They're not performing for anyone. They're simply building something real. And that absence of desperation, that's what actually attracts opportunity. They're emotionally intelligent. They understand people. They see motivations clearly. They don't judge people for being self-interested. They expect it. And that realistic understanding of human nature actually makes them more compassionate, not less. Because they don't expect people to be anything other than what they are. They maintain their independence obsessively. They have money saved. They have skills developed. They have relationships maintained. They have options, always. And because they have options, they never make decisions from desperation. They never accept disrespect. They never compromise their values for security. Because security isn't something they're missing. They've already built it. They're strategic about their relationships. They know who matters. They know who to invest in. They know when to cut ties. They don't confuse loyalty with wisdom. They don't mistake sentimentality for strategy. Their relationships are real and valuable precisely because they're chosen, not defaulted into. They're comfortable with being misunderstood. They don't need everyone to like them. They don't need everyone to understand them. They know that the people who matter will understand. And the people who don't matter, their opinions are irrelevant. This frees them to be authentic without performing. They're disciplined in small things so they can be free in big things. They maintain routines. They practice habits. They control their time. They don't waste energy on things that don't matter. And this discipline creates a foundation so solid that when real challenges come, they don't panic. They've already been practicing. They read the world constantly. They notice patterns. They see what's changing before it changes. They're not paranoid. They're just awake. And that awareness gives them an advantage that nobody can compete with. Most importantly, they understand that all of this, every principle, every practice, every discipline, serves one purpose: to give them the freedom to become who they actually want to become, not to become someone else's vision of success, not to become what the world expects, but to become their own vision of excellence. This is what untouchable means. Not unreachable, not cold, not disconnected. Untouchable means that you've become so clear about who you are, so committed to your own growth, so disciplined in your choices, that external circumstances can't shake you. People can't manipulate you. Systems can't trap you. Circumstances can't destroy you. Because you've built yourself on a foundation that's internal, not external. Now here are your reflection questions. And these matter, because understanding is one thing, but integration requires honest reflection. First, where are you still showing all your cards? Where are you still transparent about vulnerabilities that should remain private? And what would change if you learned to reveal yourself strategically instead of automatically? Second, who in your life are you depending on too much? If that person disappeared tomorrow, Would your life collapse? And are you willing to start building the independence that actually makes you powerful? Third, what emotion controls you most? What situation makes you reactive instead of strategic? And are you willing to practice the discipline required to break that pattern? These questions have answers, real answers, but only you can find them, and only if you're honest. Here's the final truth. Becoming untouchable is not about becoming someone different. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about integrating what's true about power into how you actually live. It's about making choices consciously instead of unconsciously. It's about building a life so solid, so intentional, so aligned with reality that nothing external can move you. This is available to you. Not because you're special, but because you're willing to see the world clearly and act accordingly. The untouchable person is not born. They're built. And the question isn't whether you can become untouchable. The question is, are you willing to do the work? Here's your final reflection. What will you do differently starting today? And then here's your exit. Power isn't given. It's taken by those who understand the game and refuse to apologize for playing it. Now go. Apply what you've learned. Build what needs to be built. Become untouchable. And when you do, when you finally grasp this, you'll understand that this was never about becoming someone else. It was always about becoming fully yourself. The rest will follow.